All right, Greg. Well, a
Hello.
happy Groundhog Day on this February 2nd when we're recording this in the morning. So I don't know if you guys do
I,
anything
I went to
special.
the bathroom and it was a number one, and I saw my shadow. So
Oh,
that means
six
six more
more
weeks
weeks
of
of winter.
gastric distension. I, I don't know. It's 14 below here. So of course there's going to be
14
six
below
more weeks
what?
of winter. That's
No.
exactly. Exactly. That's my IQ for today.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so for everyone listening, one, we appreciate you tuning in and checking us out. Today,
Yes.
we have a sort of a listener question we're going to get to. So we love when we get this. This was a great one. I'd go through and kind of sterilize some of it, but it's from sort of a
Yeah.
case a little while ago. So, Greg, I'll kind of read this off, and then we'll
Sure.
jump into what it is. So here is the case from a police officer, and so here's how it goes. So, dispatch received a call in the late night, early morning from a male stating that his girlfriend had been jumped and needed medical attention. So, officers arrived on the scene and saw that the female was naked on the bed, severely beaten, and having a hard time breathing. The caller, who's the boyfriend, told officers on the scene that he and his girlfriend were at a party earlier in the day and that he wanted to stay at the party longer, so his girlfriend walked home, which was several miles away from where the party was at. The suspect said when he got home, he found his girlfriend that way. So this suspect kind of gave a visual sort of description of the person, said tattoos, including on his face that looked or appeared to be like criminal or gang member tattoos. And then when they did a quick history check, he said he was on probation and recently released from prison just a few months prior to this event. And he had nearly a dozen domestic violence restraining orders. So even though this was all observed at the scene, for some reason, no one thought they had enough evidence to detain him for further questioning. And just as a caveat to that, he's not sort of armchair quarterbacking this. Neither are we. These type of things happen all the time, which is why we're going to get into this discussion of we have to have evidence to arrest a human being, right? We live in the United States still, so it just wanted to kind of caveat there. But then he said the suspect did agree to come to the station to answer questions and was brought in with a Beheller admonition, which we'll get to. And detectives interviewed him. They noticed he had a swollen hand and complained about it while they interviewed him. However, he was eventually released. So after the victim survived, came out of emergency surgery, and then gave the statement that her boyfriend, that suspect, had beat her and stabbed her in a jealous rage. Now the suspect is now on the run. So the question that the listener was sort of asking is, what can you look for? So this was all there, but how do I articulate this? What can I look for in sort of an interview, in a situation, talking to someone, that kind of will help you detain, right, a suspect in the situation? And he also is anything about their behavior? What can we articulate? What's legal, moral, and ethical, right, in this situation? What can you
Sure.
prove? And then you also want to know, why did the guy call the cops? So that was the ask from one of the listeners, which we appreciate him reaching out. And so I'm going to throw it to you to start off. I just wanted to give the sort of facts of the case and
Yeah.
what
And so
happened.
let's do this non sequitur. Let's not follow a pattern, Brian,
Okay.
because there's so much here to
Yeah, yeah. There's
unpack.
a bunch. Okay.
And I want to kind of jump around. The first thing is I want to get back to why this person would call 911. But look, you're a copper, you're a trained investigator. I don't care if you work HR or if you're a parent. Here's the idea:
Yeah.
your suspect. First of all, you're not sure he's a suspect, okay? But hold on, you kind of had that inkling
Right.
because even when you
And
wrote to us, you said,
well,
"Hey, this person
that
looks
that
like what I've
and
seen
and
as a."
that's a good point because you use the term suspect, but we know that now, right? That's now
We know it now,
at the
but we
time
didn't know it then.
it would be the reporting party,
Yes,
right? Or some
yes.
some
So,
person who
so
called 911, a witness, whatever.
exactly. But if you're thinking of both sides of the issue, like for example, you and I both disagree with this. Hey, you can tell on the voice of the 911 caller.
Yeah.
You can't tell shit. But now you've got a situation where I have to start thinking this person is grievously injured and might die. He's thinking the same thing. And when I say he, it's he or she or whatever,
Yeah.
whoever calls.
Yeah.
He doesn't know if she's going to live or die. And so he's already working the alibi. Why? Because he went to jail last time.
Yep.
Why? Because there were witnesses. Why? Because this witness is either going to finger him
Yeah.
for the suspect or she's going to
What was you gonna
die.
say?
And
Yeah.
so I need some distance. I need the gift of time and distance. The most common legal challenge is identification. that means that in court they say, well, it wasn't me, or you couldn't have told it was me, or there's nothing linking me.
Right.
You're saying, wow, what a big chance to link yourself. Now, he already knows that there's going to be a DNA evidence all over the place. He already knows if she dies, he's going to be the number one suspect.
Yeah.
So what he's trying to do is he's trying to get his version of the truth and timetable out on the table. And you're going to say, Brian, you're not, but an average human that hasn't had the training experience that we've had is going to say, who would risk that? And I would tell you, anybody. So anybody that's got a lot to lose is going to look at this and go, holy crap, the stakes are very high. I'd rather be in charge of these next few hours and days than have you in charge of it. That's why he did it.
And that's a great explanation, not just for this case, but for other ones, right? Because you always get
for
people,
your kids.
Why would the suspect do that? Or I would never do that. What they would do, and people try to, and that's horseshit. It's horrible commentary. It's fair because they don't understand how this is. So he, like you said, he wanted his version of the truth. He wanted his story.
He wanted it
to be out there first.
It's a lead, right? And he wanted to buy himself the time. So I've got a swab, and I'm going to do an oral swab for DNA. And I go, would you voluntarily submit? Yeah. Well, why would you voluntarily submit? Well, because I know that you're never going to find my DNA because I haven't been at the scene. And then they find the DNA, and now the person's on the lam. It happens all the time. Why? Because humans lie. Why? Because humans have been given the innate ability to communicate with other humans and sometimes to lie during those meetings because it's in your best interest as a survival mechanism. So however your brain equates survival to a situation is how that interview is going to go. So now that's why I wanted to start there, Brian. So let's
and you tied right there.
You
tied lying to the survival mechanism, which is exactly what it is, which is sometimes why you can tell deception because your brain is trying to keep you in. Your brain thinks you're in a survival situation. It's arguing with your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex knows what's coming out of your mouth is complete BS. So that sort of cognitive dissonance right there.
So you're trying to manifest
itself physiologically and biometric. Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
So no, but that's a key point because sometimes I forget we're on a podcast and I think it's just you and I talking. You get what I'm trying to say? Here. No, have you ever done that where we're going like, no, Brian, that's not
we do that all the time. We have to fix that sometimes. I apologize, everyone, when we don't explain something because Greg and I get lost in our own conversation.
Because we're having a ball, So police interviews are used to obtain evidence or to determine the relevance of evidence that you might have found through a conversation. And that conversation can include questioning.
Yes.
So that's why Miranda didn't apply here, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But Miranda's a 4-point standard that comes up when you have two things. You have to have custody and you have to have interrogation. Now, you can't interrogate somebody unless they're in custody. And you say, yeah, they're giving them the third degree. Well, if you're not in custody, it doesn't apply. That's just an intense interview, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea here is I want you to think about it, okay? We always think the worst, and you coppers got to stop doing this. You're always thinking in there that it's some kind of chess match. It's not a chess match. It's not a chess match at all.
Checkers at best.
It's a weak game at checkers too, because and I take it back, and I wrote you this just this morning before we came on.
Yeah.
The role of a scout sniper is to support the intelligence preparation of the battle space. You know that. I know that. Not just long range precision fire, but gathering information for intelligence purposes. Why? Because, and I'm speaking from somebody that's not a sniper that uses snipers. I use snipers because snipers are great at getting into places and listening, smelling, tasting, and giving me the feel that's on the ground. Now, if they got to kill, of course, they're trained, amazing killers. So coppers, that's your role too. Your role is to take a look at what the evidence is telling you, not try to put it together in a way like a chess match so it behooves you, because the evidence tells the story. And guess who else tells the story? The suspect and the witnesses. So rule number 1, SDFF. Okay, shut the F up and listen. So when you get in the interview room, and there's so many books and oh my God, so many methods and some that we completely patently disagree with. And the number one thing is, if the person is talking, you know what you do? You keep them talking. So let's think of Hippocratic oath. If the person's breathing, first thing we don't want to do is jam a dirty sock in their mouth and block their airway.
First do no harm, right? Yeah.
Exactly. This person wants to tell you a story.
Great.
In that story, there may be some elements of truth. It may be a total fabrication from the word one. But if they're voluntarily and freely giving it to you, then you know what, Brian? Start taking notes and
Yep.
start jotting down and use a pregnant pause.
Go on.
And you get
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say? Brian's
Yeah.
favorite, go on. Why? Because I cannot impeach your testimony if you don't give testimony. And
Yeah.
by the time you get on the stand in a legal trial, okay, or I have an arrest warrant for you, the rules change. Now it's back to that checkers game that you said, but the rules to the checker game are so imposing that like now you waited too long. What? Okay, yeah, you touched your checker, so you have to use that one. What? And now you're going to be playing catch up. So the idea is the person that was on the ground. Well, first of all, Brian, we know that witnesses are generally the worst witnesses,
Yeah.
eyeball witnesses.
It's yeah.
They
They're usually
interpret it,
horrible.
their
Yeah.
way. Second thing is sometimes victims. I've known people that
Yeah.
were victims of a
Yep.
crime that made what appeared to be a deathbed confession, and it was all hokum because they were under what? They were under duress and they were under
Yeah.
gas. They
Yeah.
were, somebody had pumped them full of a bunch of drugs, and they said, "Oh yeah, I was raped." And you go, wait, you're here for a car accident. They don't even know what the heck is going on, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
idea is that we don't want to be led around by the nose. We want to sit down calmly across from a person when they'll allow it, and we want to say, listen, I'm here because I need to hear your story. Tell me
Okay.
what happened. How did
Yeah.
that happen,
So that's
right?
a
And keep that ball rolling.
that's a good, always a good place to start, and in a number of
Sure.
situations, any type of interviews, questioning, talking to someone on the street. How many times have we done that with
Yep.
whatever, we're walking into a business that we're going to work with, and someone strikes up a conversation, starts talking. I try to keep that going as long as I can and find out what's on their
Exactly.
mind, right? Oh, why do you think, let
Yep.
them talk, let them have their say. So, because he did ask, hey, what can you do in those situations? So obviously, one, if someone's talking, you let them
Yep.
talk. You let them keep going and keep talking. So, the
Yes.
other thing is then, and like you said, you could obviously impeach that testimony later, right? When you have other facts to prove that thing. Oh, well,
Exactly.
wait, you said you were here at this time, but this security camera here shows you leaving at this time. And then now you have some discrepancy in there.
Precisely.
And so you can sort of impeach their testimony in a sense. And then,
And let's say they clam up. Go there just a little further.
okay.
If you want to impeach their testimony, let's say that they clam up and they invoke the right to an attorney. They don't have that right when it's a voluntary interview, of course. And you can, in other words, unless you're in
Yeah.
custody and there's an interrogation,
You,
one of the
they,
four-pronged standards doesn't apply.
you
Now, they
don't
could
need an
ask for an
attorney. You
attorney.
could just get
You
up
could
and
say,
leave.
you don't need an attorney.
Yeah. You're
You
free to
can leave
go.
at any time.
Yeah.
And the court understands that, right?
Yeah.
So, but the idea is that you don't even have to impeach their testimony if they walk off. Imagine the power at a bench trial or a jury trial where you go, well, he was talking to me voluntarily and he set up this timeline. Here's the interview. Here's the video. Here's his words. And now he appears before you. So is his memory better today, or was it better when he was in
Yeah.
there hours after the victim? Do you see how that can work to your benefit? So the idea is you sometimes don't know the relevance of the piece of information that you have, right? And this is why I keep using that sniper example, Brian. Do you think that all snipers, every time they saw something, knew the value of the intelligence that they were developing back from the
No,
communications of
sometimes you don't know
information?
at all. Yeah,
No.
sometimes it's the smallest thing
And
that for someone else, there's wait
months
a minute,
later,
that's
somebody comes up
significant.
and
Yeah.
you got it. So and I'll give you the example here. You and I know this copper, and you and I know the situation that he was faced with. So you and I know that there were people that were at the scene and there were people at the hospital, and this guy's voluntarily, who called 911, is now
Yeah.
voluntarily accompanying them to conduct an interview. This is the perfect storm for good or evil. One, if you don't have communication, cross communication, you're going to miss a vital cue. Hey, guess what? We found high impact blood spatter. Well, that certainly doesn't go with what we're talking about. Or is there another suspect? Or was he with some, right? So that information is only as valuable. Like probable cause never dissipates, Brian. It can withstand the test of time. But evidence is very different. Evidence, if not utilized, like for example, in this case, we know that some of the first investigators on the scene thought that the female victim was not going to live. They
Yeah.
didn't think that she was going to make it. That changes the timeline. The other thing is, during this investigation with the transport to the emergency room, they found stab wounds. That changes the entire
Right.
dynamic of the situation, right? But if I'm in the interview room and I'm going,
Right.
go on. And I'm just taking notes. And I don't understand that there's been a change. I
Yes.
don't understand the change in the relationship between me and the person I'm talking to.
And
Right?
that comes into just you're talking about like updating your hypothesis here. You have new and incoming
Exactly. Now,
information. So
this is the time that
once
OODA loop actually applies,
yeah, so
right? For
you
the
because
first time and
you'll start
forever.
going on that trajectory and you're going down this path.
Right.
And if you stay on that
Right.
path without taking in new incoming information, you're gonna get off. You're gonna be off, right? So now I'm going,
You're
okay, well, I
exactly
got to
right.
talk to him. This is what he said happened. And then, well, wait a minute, there's stab wounds. Oh, we didn't,
Yes.
if I don't know that at the time. So part of that, it's a communication issue, which is gonna happen, right? Do
Yes.
you have the
Yes.
most relevant information before talking to this individual, right? And I I remember one time it's just popped into my head, but it's a perfect story. As I was sitting at I was hanging out with a couple of my buddies, and we are at this bar near my buddy's place and we are having a beer, and at the time my buddy was dating the waitress that worked there, so we all knew her,
Yeah.
like we were friends. My other buddy who just came in had no idea about that relationship, so when she's coming up like hanging over us and like talking this, she walks away and my buddy just immediately goes, oh my god, that girl is so into you, he wants it, blah blah blah, and he's going on, and my
Exactly.
buddy goes, yeah, I'm dating her, and he's like, okay.
Oh
So
my
step
gosh.
one, gather all the facts.
Knowing what we
He was like,
knowing what we know now. What movie was that in? Do you remember?
yeah,
That's such a knowing what we know
I
now
can't
is a
remember, but
completely different
but
hypothesis.
but
Yeah.
that's the idea is you have to do that. But
Yes.
those communication things are going to happen. So
But
and this goes,
here let's put a point on that. You come up with that great thing. Don't walk away from it.
yeah.
Know who you're interviewing. Is this a suspect? Is this a witness? Could it be a little of both? Okay. Was this person even at the scene? Could they be a mentally challenged person that
Well,
wants to
that's
insinuate themselves into an investigation? What you don't know is what's going to screw up your ultimate testimony in your court case, right?
well, and that's to the point of, okay, well, wait a minute. You're sitting here and saying he had all of these arrests for
Yeah.
domestic violence. He was on
Yes.
probation, just literally just released out of prison a few months prior,
Yes.
and this happened. Now, what are
That
the
doesn't mean that he did it. First of
exactly,
all,
it doesn't, but
right?
it certainly adds
So
to the it
yeah.
adds to
So
the
you know
fact
what you
that this is
do?
a likely suspect, right?
So you know what you do as a copper? You look at him and you go, "Hey, I love that you came down to talk to us. I hope everything's going to be okay with your girlfriend. Obviously, we're as interested in you and what happened. Got to tell you, somebody just told me they know you from being in lockup, and it was for domestic violence. So, yeah, that kind of makes me think that what's going on here. But I'm not gonna take a side. I just want to hear the story. You don't
Yeah.
hide the fact. You get
So
what I'm trying to say?
so
And then if the person's going, oh, you're gonna make me go, I'm not making you shit. I want to hear your story. Tell me what happened, right?
well, and so this is, and I just, to everyone listening, I want us to be careful in this, because when you get into
Yep.
different interview and interrogation techniques, there's all kinds of stuff out there. Some of them will probably sue if I keep saying what I keep saying about them, so I
Yep.
should stop.
Yep.
But
I absolutely agree.
they
And
can
some are
well,
hokum,
some
and
are
some are
junk,
really good,
but
but they're
they're very.
all context and relevance based.
Yes, so that's the point on all of them. They're all
Yes.
heavily
Yes.
dependent on specific context, whereas what we're talking about is a general approach to any conversation,
Any,
interview, interrogation, whether you're
even with
that's
your kids,
well, yeah, that's
even
what to
with a
say.
student in a class, right?
The grocer checking you out at the grocery store, as they're ringing you up, you know what I mean? Those type of
Right.
conversations. So we keep it very, very general, because some of those things that are out there have led to people giving false confessions. So I'll leave it at
Exactly.
that.
So let's throw this. The Beheller, you talked about Behell
Yeah.
warnings earlier on, the admonition, right? But it's a warning. And the warning is like, look, you're not under arrest and you're free to leave whenever you want. That's all you got to say.
Yep.
And the idea is that when you're a cop, sometimes you go too far because you're trying to outthink the suspect. I would tell you to take a knee here. And I don't mean the Copernic knee, I mean a metaphoric knee. It's not important that you tell the suspect or the person being interviewed any substantial facts. And cops can lie. They can create a ruse going, well, they just lifted your thumbprint off of the headboard. You can throw something out there. But why would you want to in this specific set of circumstances? Okay. Because you could screw up a substantive due process by telling this person that, hey, listen, confide in me. We're not going to arrest you. You get what I'm saying? Well, no matter what happens, you're walking out of here tonight. You don't know that, Brian. You don't
Yeah.
know that. So doing that is violating a sacred trust. So my thing is, before anything, think of Hippocrates and say to the person, listen, I want to hear your story, and shut up. Now, if it's relevant to say, if the person starts saying, now you're not going to listen to me because I've been in jail for domestic violence, and you go, yeah, that's not me, man. I didn't put you in jail for domestic violence. I need to know the story. And the more we know, the better we can help out your girlfriend, right? So you can say things like that to keep the conversation going, but limit the scope. Because if not,
Yeah.
the person's going to go, I see what you're doing. You get what I'm saying? I'm not stupid. So don't
Yeah.
be stupid. Go back to that checkers match.
So,
Hey, it's your move.
well,
It's your move. That opens up a whole
that
conversation, right?
that's what I was getting at too. It's another point about some of the different
Yeah.
techniques or tactics I see people using or teaching or talking about. And again, maybe in some specific context that might work, but a lot of them are parlor tricks. And I don't always
Yes.
mean that. I don't always mean that in a negative way, because there's sometimes we use parlor trick kind of things as an example, like in class when we talk about like some handshakes and how to get someone to move from one place to, like, it's a trick. But here's the thing: if I know the trick and you use it on me, well, that changes that changes things drastically. I've had that on calls
Precisely.
before where someone was doing, I forget which one it was. It's like where they repeat back part of what you said and then they use it in their word,
Yep.
and and like I'm like, hey, you might want to fucking stop doing that right now because you look like an asshole right now. I know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to
Right.
manipulate the
Right.
conversation, which means you're not being genuine with me, which means you can fuck off. And they're like, beat
So
red, like,
but what does that do to your trust level? What
because
does that do
there's
to your
none. It's
trust
gone. It's
level?
out the window.
And are you going to build it? Are you going to build it after that?
Well, that's
You
why
know, so
this one's a good one, like you said, to notice something. Okay,
yep.
like he's talking about his hand being hurt or something like that. It's like, okay,
Yep.
we'll do stuff like that. And we've both done it. And there
Yep.
was one that used where I think it was a guy was limping, and you're like, oh man, you must have slipped on that ice back there. Me too. I'm kind of limping too. And the guy was like, yeah, yeah, and it's like, oh, you're just gonna fall in line with my story. We just happen to have the same exact thing,
Right.
or they're gonna go, oh
So
no,
be
man, actually,
careful.
I was working on my farm, and you know what I mean. Like, there's a reason for it when you
Exactly.
do that
So
stuff.
so the leading question can get you into trouble.
Yeah,
So the idea, and again, this is so context determinant, right?
yeah,
So I will tell you that in this situation, and you know me,
yeah.
Brian's worked with me for a long time. So Shelley and Sean, and when they see me do an interview, you would be convinced that I got hit in the head really hard just
Yeah,
before I
sometimes.
walked into the
Yeah.
interview
Yeah.
because I'm forgetting stuff. I'm asking the suspect for a pen.
Dropping a
I'm
pet.
doing this
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous
Yeah.
stuff. And why am I doing it? Because I'm trying to distract them that this guy's a buffoon and he has no idea where he's going.
Yeah.
And so I would hold up my own hand and I would go and hold up the wrong hand, you know me, and I would go, "Hey, so what's with the hand?" And the person would say, "Yeah, it's really hurting now." And because you want them to tell you about the hand. Why? Because sooner or later you're going to have evidence again to impeach or compare. And look, anytime you're creating a new conversation with a human you don't previously know, because that changes everything too.
Yes.
If you'd arrested this person before, or if
Yeah.
you know this person casually or intimately, okay. So, but you're meeting a person for the first time. So what you don't have is a baseline for comparison. So the first thing you're doing is the bad test. Baseline plus anomaly
Yep.
equals decision. So I'm never going to get to the decision in this interview. I may, after the interview, walk out and go, I have enough for an arrest warrant or a search warrant, or, this guy's the wrong guy, right? That's going to happen afterwards. So what do I have to do inside? I have to develop a baseline. Baselines change with new and incoming information. The point of OODA. Look, take
Yeah.
OODA, write it down, and stop using
Or-
it. Okay. But if you're going to use it, separate, right?
Just
Because I hear that the guy asked that question the other day when we were on a podcast. Well, it's just like the OODA loop. Shut up, because it's not. So observe, orient are
yeah.
something, and the decision action are something. So there's two different steps, right?
Yeah.
And the decision action phase is ongoing. Why? Based on the observe and orient.
Yeah.
So you have two types of information. You have the new and incoming information that's changing your perception, but you also have the baseline information upon which you're drawing reasonable conclusions. So when you're in a firefight, a dogfight with an airplane, by the way, Shelley and I the other night had popcorn and watched that new Top Gun Maverick.
I thought it was
So
good.
I'm ripped compared to some of those folks. ripping my shorts maybe. But the idea is, I thought it was a great romp. You could put your brain on a
Yeah,
shelf and
yeah,
just
no,
enjoy
it
the whole
wasn't,
time.
but they didn't, I
But
didn't like, they didn't go into any weird, it was just a good
no,
action movie. There
and
was
it
no message,
exactly,
there
they
was
didn't even
no,
name the enemy. We were
yeah,
having fun,
yeah,
right? So it felt good. It was a
yeah,
feel good, and afterwards, I made passionate love
love, yeah, there you
alone
go.
again.
Yeah, and you're,
But the idea with me, the idea though that I'm getting at here is everybody tries to misapply John Boyd to a setting. Oh, it's great in the business world. No, not unless you're in a business for a bunch of fighter pilots. Okay.
yeah,
And again, the idea of it
yeah,
is this applies in this situation. Ask a pointed question. Okay. For example, hey, I've hurt my hand before and I
yeah,
know how bad that feels. Okay. What you're doing is you're telling your story. Stop for a minute. Think about it. Whose story do you want to get? You want to get a baseline. So you want to get his or her story. So, have you hurt that hand before? That's a valid question. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Did you hurt that tonight? No, it was on the way home. I slipped on the ice, like you said, right? Okay. The idea is that I don't want to start asking. Your first instinct as a cop or a parent or a teacher or HR is you're going to want to stop. I caught you in a lie right there. The minute you do that, Brian, you might as well throw the rest of the interview
yeah.
out the window,
There's now
because
it's just,
now the person's going
yeah,
to go, "Hey, I'm under the gun." Don't do that. What you got to do is you got to make sure you're not under arrest. You're free to leave whenever you want, but I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to listen to your story. Well, you're not going to take me seriously. I'm taking everything you say seriously. I'll write it down. You don't want me to write it down? I'll record it. I don't record it. You're in charge here. For the next few minutes or few hours, you're in charge. Tell me what happened, buddy. And when a person, don't call me your buddy. Well, you tell me what to call you. You want me to call you Frank? I'm going to shut up and sit here. You stay your story, right? Tell me your story. Because without a baseline, Brian, you have nothing for comparison.
and
Go get a warrant on conjecture, right?
yeah,
You've had
and
to speak to judges before many times.
it's,
Both sides of the bench.
yeah,
But the idea is when
boys
you're
will be
there,
boys.
you can only deal with facts. You can only swear to what you know.
uh,
And people go, "Oh, well, cops can use a ruse." Yeah, you can use a ruse. Try to use a ruse in front of a judge. You
Well,
get what I'm
that's
trying
the
to say?
thing
Your
is you
ass is going to
can't.
be in a federal
Yeah, yeah.
prison.
This thing is if that becomes uncovered. And this that goes back to some of the
Yep.
tactics or techniques I see people use. And even if they work, it's like, yeah, they work because that guy had a shitty defense attorney. That's why. Because if
Yep.
they had a good
Yep.
attorney,
And
that
what you
stuff would
did
have
is
got
you created
you would have got
you
this case
created a
thrown out.
carbuncle now that
Yeah.
yes.
And
Okay,
that's the problem. It
the
then
pearl.
becomes successful because someone goes, "Oh, I used this before," and then you get to the one where it didn't work, and now that's the actual person who did the
It,
crime, and your case got thrown out.
equate that as being a Marine. I'm going to take you
Yeah,
back. Okay, this is regression. Have you ever gone into an AO where your unit has to do the left seat, right seat, and change out? And before you do the swap in the thing, you start looking at the ground truth and figure out that you're going to have a harder time
yeah,
getting into this AO
yeah,
because the previous unit screwed up a lot of
yeah.
stuff. They booted a lot of the wrong doors. They were a
Yep.
little
Piss
heavy-handed.
people
They did,
off.
right? Okay. And guess what? You don't want to be that investigator because every time Tommy gets in there, hey, that started as a disorderly arrest and there was a bunch of them. And then the next thing you know, he got a full confession. Listen, an admission or a confession is fantastic, but do you need one? No, you don't need it because more cases are solved on circumstantial evidence than any other factor. And if the person's talking to you and their story doesn't add up and you have evidence to corroborate your claim, you don't need them because they're
Yeah,
probably not going to take the stand anyway,
that
right? So
right.
you
And
must have your case in chief strong enough to go ahead. And what we're trying to say is stop. Like, do you remember my cousin Vinny? How many times have I testified to a line in my
two
cousin Vinny?
Utes.
But you remember when Macchio is standing there and the guy says, you said at that time to me, the sheriff, that I killed the guy at the Sack of Suds. And he goes, I said that? And he goes, yeah, you said right here, I killed the guy at the Sack of Suds. And what he said is, I killed the guy at the Sack of Suds?
Yeah,
He was in disbelief.
yeah,
But the idea is taken out of context, Brian.
right.
First of all, hilarious film.
Yeah, great
But
movie.
and that was D-Day, the guy from Animal House that was sheriff.
Yeah,
But second of all, Brian, those are the types of things that can happen. So if the person wants to tell their story, let them tell the story. Same thing is you better serialize that 911 tape and you better save it for a good long time. Why? Because it's going to be important to show that there was no coercion when they called 911
yeah.
from the police. So that
And,
starts building your baseline where well before you were actually interviewed
Well, and
this
that's the
person.
thing is it too. Then it adds to, hey, look, I'd love to come and talk to you. You don't have to come down.
Yep.
It's on you. You're not under arrest. You're
Yep.
not being detained. You're free to leave at any time. Like that. Those things are like, okay, well, they went on their own free will. And
Yep.
with everything that we're talking about, a lot of it's not just dependent on the context, but it's dependent on you, the person asking the questions, right? So sometimes I see
Exactly.
people try to learn a style or use a method, but it doesn't really work for their personality. So what you have to do
Yep.
is take what we're talking about, or someone teaches you, go, well, how would this work for me? Because your approach is different than my approach, which is different than someone else's.
Absolutely. Always
But
has
that's
been. Yep.
but that's personality dependent. That's because of how we are. Like I
Right.
can't do what you do. That would be it would look so ridiculous if I was doing the same thing you were. People are like,
It would
I'm
look like
not
you're
buying
acting.
this.
It would
Yes,
look
because I
staged or
would be.
awkward,
So
wouldn't it?
you
Sure.
have to be sort of genuine and authentic anytime you're
Yes.
doing this. So you have to really want to know, and you have to seem genuine, right? And so that's the biggest thing, is taking all of these different things that we're talking about and putting in. And to go back to even specifically this case, we're talking about
Yeah.
getting someone to talk and drawing that out and getting it go as long as possible, because what happened in this specific case too that we're talking about was they did find more evidence sort of after the fact,
Exactly.
after the person had been released, and then when the victim came out of the emergency surgery and said, yeah, he's the guy that did it. So now he was gone, now he's on the run. So the idea is it's a time thing, and then you can see that build in their head, like, you know what I mean. So
Yep.
there's ways to do that, and I don't want to get too specific, but it's more learning about your own approach and how to do that. And that's why when we do those different, like, exercises, sometimes it's, in a shopping mall, we'll go ask, go find out, what did you find? You observed something, did you go up and conduct a street interview on someone? How would you
Exactly.
approach that person, right? What's the
And how
best
do
way
we
for
start
you?
that street interview? You've seen me do it. I've seen you do it.
Well,
The best way to do it is walk up and go, "Hey, how did that start?" And when the person goes, "Hey, it's none of your business," then you go, "No, I'm actually a film student, this,
yeah,
whatever else like that." But how many times has somebody told us to go mind our own business? I don't remember a
very
time.
very
I don't
rare.
remember a time
Very
because
rare, usually
it's
when
so
they're up to
rare.
something that they
It's
don't want people
remarkable.
to know about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
exactly. Are you a
so
cop? Right?
it's
They
more
start there.
evidence in
But
support of whatever it was we thought it was. But the idea,
everybody wants to tell their story, right?
and and
So,
and
and I will equate it this way. Let's look at the other side of this coin. I want everybody to think of this. We're going to do a mental exercise right now, whether you're driving, whether you're watching us on YooHoo or whatever the hell you're doing right now. And it's Groundhog Day. So look for your shadow while you're
yeah,
answering. Do you remember the first time that you got punched or slapped and you never even thought to bring your arms up? The very first time that someone hit you when you're completely unprepared. Okay.
it's happened to me
That's
a
what it's
lot.
like being, yeah, well, listen, that's what it's like being unprepared when you go in for an interview and
Yeah,
you're getting to like that person. And all of a sudden somebody comes in your ear and goes, she died at the ER. Or that guy's got 2 extra stab wounds. Or, hey, did you search this guy? Because we're missing a gun.
yeah,
Okay. All of a sudden you get that now there's another side of that coin. That's when you think you've got the person on the ropes and you're there with your streamlight and you're wrestling around on the ground and the person smiles at you, even with the broken nose and the black eye, and goes, think you're the first person to hit me that hard? Okay. The idea is that you going in with your preconceived notions is the absolute worst, because your biases will start taking over and you'll start thinking that you're clever. If you go in with the intent to conduct an interview and get as much information as possible, and less is more, you talk less. Like even the word "and," well, then what happened? Oh, and where were you guys? Oh, okay. Doing those type of things just to keep the person rolling down the hill is going to be a much better strategy. If you notice things, if you notice the hand, the fingernails, all that other stuff, you can say, "Hey, I got to throw a piss. You got a minute?" And the person will say, "Yeah, yeah, go ahead." That's a normal thing. That person. Then when you come back with 2 Cokes or something. But when you step out, go, "Hey, this guy's hand swollen up. He looks like a lefty because he signed the waiver of notifications with his left hand." You get what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
Hey, call the scene and find out if there's any whatever. Because what happens again, and it's your point, that central communication layer, I
yeah,
need to know updates along that. Did she die? Do I need to stop at this point and say, at this time, you're not free to leave, you're under arrest, right? Because something has been divulged. But most of the time, and specifically in an interview like this, you're going to underestimate your opponent. You're going to think, oh, I'm more clever than this person, because they're thinking they're out thinking you right now. That's why they didn't invoke an attorney, is they're thinking, hey, I got everybody but the judge. Nobody tries to outthink a judge. But everybody tries to outthink a prosecutor or a defense attorney.
yeah,
Everybody tries to think that
yeah,
outthink that copper, right? Like if
yes,
they didn't, Why do people hide stuff? Hiding is a demonstration of intent.
Yep.
Why do people hide stuff in their house? Because they think they're smarter than the SWAT team. Go
Yeah.
to white belt.
Yeah.
Stop thinking black belt. Go to white belt and go to the simplest rules. Am I lying? In my search warrant, the idea that you hid this stuff is going to figure prominently, and in your prosecution. Well, he didn't know the stuff was illegal. Yeah, that's why he went through 9 steps to hide it from me.
Right.
With the smell and behind a
Yeah.
wall and the thermal,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. That
This is
those
one
are.
of those times. I'm telling you that the person that's across from you is smarter than the average bear. And if you start being condescending or trying to outthink them or use some parlor trick on them, they're going to resent it. So when I walk up to a person on the street, I never lie to them. I tell them, hey, we're doing scripting for a college course that we're doing around the corner. And it looks like you guys were arguing about something. You mind if I ask you about that? And what do they normally say? Well, I guess so, right? And then you go, okay, what just happened? And then they start talking. And then the next thing you're sitting down and they go, Billy was there and Tommy was there, and they're pouring out their heart to you. You've
Yeah.
seen that.
Yeah.
So why do we want to potentially disrupt that or violate due process or lie to a person that we don't need to, right? A ruse and a lie are a little different to me. A ruse is to get you to say more. Well, it's funny because she's got an injury that's pretty consistent with the ring on your left finger there, and then the
Yeah.
person goes, well, that's bullshit because I didn't slap her, I choked her or whatever, right? Okay. But
Yeah.
if you're thinking you're thinking Hollywood scripting. You're not thinking real life, right? Because
Yeah.
the res gesti, the whole principle of a res gesti statement is where a person makes an excited utterance and tells you or shows you something that they weren't thinking they were going to divulge. And that happens when what? Divided attention.
Yep.
So Brian and I, folks, we create a lot of flack, a lot of useless go nowhere information. So you're a little bit off center when we're doing the interview, but we still let you talk. What we mean is we prepare the room. For example, we make sure that you're facing the door. Facing the door means
With the
that
door
there's a
open.
way out. We
Yeah.
make sure the door is open. So
Yeah.
those little tricks of the trade, which we won't go into further here, but on
Yeah.
Patreon, we'd be glad to, are those types of things that can change it. And some jerk in a room wants to be a sniper and they're saying, well, yeah, but it's an officer safety issue. Look, if you have an officer safety issue, the person's a suspect and maybe they should be in handcuffs.
Yeah.
And this is no longer a consensual interview, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Brian, if I'm afraid of the person, or you're a
Yeah.
real dick and it's a witness and they want to punch your lights out because you're being a jerk.
Yeah.
That's
No,
it's so rare. It's got hen's teeth, right?
it is, and that's why kind of it goes back to there is no magic trick. There is no hidden
Nope.
piece of the puzzle. There is no golden puzzle piece. There is no any of that. It's just getting people to talk, right? And especially
Yes.
situations like this where the guy came up, okay, he's used to beating up women. Okay, so that's his
Yes.
go-to. He has no problem with being physically violent with women. So what does he do? Okay, he does it. Now this time, oh man, this went pretty far. I better get her some help. I can't have this happen.
Right.
I need some distance. I got to come up with a story now. Okay, maybe if I call
Right.
them and say this, got it. So that stuff is thought of
I
very, very,
control the narrative.
but it's
Yes.
it's 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 very juvenile, right? It's very in the moment. There's not a lot of extraneous details you can add to that, which is why you bring up the keep them talking because they're going to perjure
Yes.
themselves, right? They're going to say something later, they're going to give something away. And then, again, even as simple as, oh man, like, hey, let's get her some help. Let's figure out what we need to do here. Are
Yep.
you okay? Those things to help kind of bring down the guard a little bit and just continue with that and letting that person. And that goes back to kind of you as an individual and how you do that. You
Yes.
got to find what works for you, right? And then you can add in those little tricks. I mean, the big one, I always do. So when you're going to meet someone, you do something very specific because you're a big guy, you're loud, you're Greg, and so
Right.
what you'll do sometimes when you go up to ask directions or something or ask for something, you'll kind of like shrink down and hunch down a little bit, and you'll grab the bottom of your jacket and seem a little unsure and say, excuse me,
Right.
and you make yourself appear to be
Because I don't want to look
lost.
like a predator.
Right.
Right.
You don't want to
Right.
come up to
Yeah.
someone and they go, get away from me. Right. Or same thing, like
Yeah.
every time when I meet someone, I lean in with my ear, right, to like sound like I'm trying to listen to what their name is. But what I'm really doing is
Yeah.
showing them my jugular and carotid artery. And I put my
Right.
hand facing up so they can see the inside of my palm and inside of my wrist. Why? Because those are signals to your primitive brain to go, this person is not a threat. And that's all it
Yep.
is. It's
Yep.
it's de-escalating a situation before, you may even need to, before it even starts. And so that just
Yep.
enhances the dialogue. So that's what works for me. You have things that work for you. Those are the things that you can use just to create
Yep.
some sort of communication and connection. Because like you said,
Exactly.
the guy called 911. So he
Yep.
wants to get his story out there, right? If he
So tell
didn't,
them that.
yeah, but
So,
that's what I'm
so
saying,
first of
because
all,
otherwise he
yeah,
would have
you're
just took
you're
off
you're
and no
so
one
true.
and would have found her, and then they would go looking for. They would have put it together eventually. But he thinks, oh, okay, I'm smart. I know how to do this. I'll get the story going. Give myself a little
Yep.
time and distance here. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep.
And psychologically, what he was
Thanks.
thinking,
Thanks
why
for
he
being
didn't bolt?
here. I'd
Yeah,
shake your hand, but it looks like you hurt your hand.
yeah,
Stop. Don't say another word. Okay. Then I do non sequitur. I do not in order because it works for my brain. My brain is a pretty chaotic place anyway. But then I'll go all the way through what they're talking, not interrupting, because interrupting, like I know some people that use an interruption. Wait, wait, wait. Go back, and they use that as a tool. But it's not your story. I want it's theirs.
yeah,
So I'll let them say something, and now they've given me three things that are in a logical row. Yeah. Then I came back and I noticed she was on the couch. Well, then I turned on a light and I noticed she wasn't breathing. Well, then I noticed, holy crap, I'm standing in some blood or whatever. And then I'll go, wow. Well, you called 911. And then I'll stop. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
Yeah, I called 911 because I was afraid of this and it. Oh, okay. But you called it as soon as you got to the house. No, no. Like I said, I was coming in the house. And clarification of a certain point is fine.
yeah,
Once what? Once you've established a baseline. And asking those questions, when you ask them, tell them, well, I really don't understand that. So you're saying that you did this. Yes, I did that. Okay, well, talk to me about that. Then let them go, right? Because the more that you get down, once the attorney is there, the attorney is going to say no. The attorney's going to say, and listen, we counsel people all the time. Get an attorney. Why do we counsel them to get an attorney?
yeah,
Not because you're guilty or you're not guilty, but an attorney is versed in the law.
yeah.
And there's subtle nuances within the law that you don't know. So have you ever been to an opera? Seriously, ever?
I have
I had to
not
go
been
to
to an
an
opera,
opera.
no.
Okay. I had to go to an opera. And I got to tell you that it was downtown Detroit. I was a little bit high and a little bit ripped, and I went and I didn't appreciate anything about the opera. Since that period, everybody was telling me, "Oh, the opera is the most beautiful thing," and that I didn't have anybody to give me the relevance
Yeah,
to the context I was
yeah,
experiencing.
yeah.
So to this day, I feel like an ass because I don't like opera. I don't want to hear anything. Peer Gynt can kiss my ass from a symphony. Why? Because nobody taught me to appreciate that. You don't know in this person's story what's necessary. So shut up for a minute and let them get a lot out there because the next interviewer, the next detective might be in on that. And they might go, hey, you got the missing piece of evidence in the Kellner case. That's why I'm telling you that the
Yeah.
sniper doesn't have to be an intel officer. All they're providing you is information, but it's timely and relevant
And
information
and
based on the context of the crime.
and that's why internally when these things are ongoing, it's always good to with who's ever involved. Okay, what do we know right now? Got it. You
Yes.
know this, and this. Got it.
What's our
Okay.
plan?
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, what's
Right.
the plan? And then, hey, this is
What do you
all we
need from
know
me?
right now. So when something
Right.
happens, we all need to be immediately updated, right? So that's like in this case,
Yes.
hey, it turns out there's stab wounds on
Exactly.
her. Okay, boom. Now that adds to the net there,
Yep.
right? To go, okay, that
Yep.
changes the course of this investigation, or that changes what else we need to look for, or it opens up a new layer. And
Yep.
whatever that artifact or evidence is, that's why it's so important. And you'll realize right away whether
Exactly.
whether it's significant or whether it just sort of falls to the floor as well. Turns out that's actually not a big deal, right? Or whatever the case
Exactly.
is. So I think the communication part is obviously huge and important. And
So,
knowing
but think
knowing
about
that you
that.
don't know
Think of
everything when you go into the conversation,
that's where you need to start.
and
Right.
not
So,
wanting to
so
be surprised by something in there, right?
you ever see a butter sculpture or an ice sculpture or one of those
A
cool things?
butter
I've never
sculpture.
been invited to a place. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some of the places like the Butter Lamb for Easter and
Oh yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's very intricately carved. Okay, I'll tell you that I don't get to invited to a lot of five-star places if that's what they are, but I know of their existence, and I would gather just from my street knowledge that they don't put them together by duct taping or melting ice together to get the form. They start with something that's much bigger and they carve away anything that doesn't look like a duck or a person or Rodin's the thinker. So what I'm trying to say here is you come in thinking you're going to put these pieces together. What I'm telling you is let the person give you the rich, full view of their world and where it goes and where it stops. Then you can go in and you can start carving away the bullshit
Yeah.
with evidence that contradicts it. And you know what? Not everybody that's lying to you is guilty. Okay,
Yeah.
I might be cheating on my significant
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
I
That's the
might be
thing.
cheating
I
on my
might be
diet,
hiding
Brian.
dope in that
Right?
house and I don't want you to find it,
Exactly.
you know?
So hey, we were at this place and we shouldn't have been there. So the idea is the more information that you gather, and people are going, yeah, but there's a time element. No, there's not. Okay, she's going to live or she's going to die. The wounds are
Yeah.
going to heal. They're not.
That's
You're going to
out
find the
of your
knife. You're
hands
not.
anyway.
So
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 yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
so why would you allow yourself temporally to add a level of stress that you don't need? And do not do it to the suspect. If you look at your watch or act like you're out of time or go take a phone call, you're going to lose their interest. But you know what you can do? You can't say, hey, I'm parched. You want some coffee? I'll make some. It's not very good, right? That's easy. Or, hey, how about I order a pizza? You know any place in town that's a good pizza joint? Now, what are you doing is you're building rapport and maintaining trust. Building rapport, one, be prepared. Okay. Two, know who you're about to talk to. Three, set up the battle space. That's your
Yeah.
job, setting it up. Four, establish rapport and maintain rapport. Five, establish trust and maintain trust, right? And if you can do that, you were trained as a copper to take charge of the incident and always be the one directing and talking. This is the first time in your career that you need to shut up and back up and just listen for a while.
Yeah, and you bring up, a component that we mention a lot and haven't gone into detail about, but time is
Time.
it's relative. The reason it's like the show 24. It's a ticking time. Once we start involving a ticking clock, a countdown, it heightens everything. Oh my God, now there's a level of stress. Now there's a level of complexity. Now we have to do this, and it's got to get done by now. And realistically, you know, you have you always have more time than you think you do, or you can
Yep.
stretch and manipulate time
It's so
to
true.
your advantage. And when you understand the concept of time literally being relative, because it's relative, I've talked about the Greek version of time. There's chronos
Sure.
and kairos, right? There's
Yep.
chronos being there's 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, right? Very specific measurement. And then kairos being this perception of time where things can slow down or speed up. And that's how life really, really, truly is. I mean, time is very relative. So
Exactly.
if you're exerting some sort of ticking clock on it because it's a shift change or a press release has to go out, or we're holding a conference,
Yep.
that changes the situation. And I wish
You're
people
manipulating the
understood.
situation.
Yes, and
Right.
not always to your advantage, typically
No.
not to your advantage, right? So though when you look at time that way as sort of a mental construct versus how many
Yes.
minutes are in an hour, it kind of frees you up mentally as well. I mean, physically and mentally, to understand and take in more information. So I always like to put that
And
in there
that's
because
what you
we talk
so
about time and
I would
distance.
say the
Time and
caveat
distance is
you're,
so relative.
so what is the distance in this caper?
Yeah,
That's what you're hitting on,
yeah,
Brian. And I don't think the viewers might or listeners might understand that. What you're also saying is you got to distance yourself from the case. If you put yourself in the shoes of the victim, if you go, I have to do this for justice. If you say, I've been a cop a long time, this guy's not going to get away with this, or they're not going to lie to me.
yeah.
Nobody gets out of the interview room. What you're doing is you're setting a
You
standard that you don't
can't.
need to
Yeah,
set.
you don't need
Your
to. Yeah,
job is simple: gather information. Gather information for which later to process it. Now, Boyd was different because Boyd was in a firefight. And so what he tried to do is he tried to take one of those comic, the little blow up dialogue that Popeye was doing all the time. Oh, it's kind of good looking, that sidebar conversation, and say, in the moment, these are the things to consider. But the reality of the situation is without training, you're never going to have the time because you added time as a constraint. So if you take time away, it's no longer a constraint. Distance yourself from it and just have a conversation with this guy. It doesn't matter that, look, how do you think you talk to BTK? BTK
yeah.
wanted to talk. How do you
Yes.
think they're going to talk to this Oregon
Koberger. Yeah.
homicide? So, yeah, what's your story, Koberger? Now, if he lawyers up, which he's
He did.
going to, but
Yeah.
he's
He
still going
did.
to try to release information.
Yeah.
Okay, call in news sources on their own. Have you heard of those things? Yeah, why? because the person's going, hey, nobody's paying attention to me. You ever see a Hollywood starlet or a star get a DUI or get arrested in an airport for something, and you go, how stupid can they be?
Well,
No,
that
they want to get in
they want to,
variety. They
yeah,
want to get into trades. They want
that's
their
a
name
great,
back up.
that's actually a
It's a
great
tactic.
example in general when you look at different, just famous people, influencers, people who are famous for being
Yes,
famous, or actors or whatever, where they
exactly.
have to come out
Right.
with their comment on some topical issue, and everyone, I don't even know why we entertain these, but people choose to
Yeah,
entertain them, and they're really just doing it to remain relevant, because you're like, wait, when's the last time
you're
this person
exactly
was
right.
in
So,
a movie? What are they
so
selling
let's
here? Are
talk.
they trying to come up like?
Let's take a
And that's
minute
such
to
a great
explain that.
example. Yeah.
Hey, no, you're onto something here, and let me extrapolate. So there's a show called Top Chef. No, is that it? Where the chefs go together, and there's like three chefs that are judging three new
Yeah, yeah,
chefs,
yeah.
and
They come
they
up, they
go
have
through. I think
different
that's called it something
challenges,
like
and
that.
then
Yeah,
yeah, they
a
have to.
basket full of thing. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
Probably Top Chef. There's a
Shelly
few.
likes that show,
Yeah, those are great.
and so does our dog.
Yeah.
So she loves the cooking show. I can't stand them because anything that has conflict resolution in it is like work to me, right? So I'm
Yeah.
constantly on, and I hate it. But I've seen, I'd say probably 3 or 4 episodes where I watch them in their entirety so that I can draw a reasonable conclusion upon. And in every one of those episodes that I saw, the judge was moving something around on his plate with a fork and go, this is undercooked and it's inedible, and then said something. And that person ended up winning. Okay, because of the context and relevance of what they were being judged at, and you didn't know what they were being judged on. Because there's more things, the presentation, this, that. I
Well,
would think that if
there's
I
also
went to a restaurant
the
and you
editing
served
in the
me something
show.
inedible,
Yeah,
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 yeah, exactly. But why do they do that? They do that to throw you off the sense, to
yeah.
make the timing, to make it confrontational. They do that. Folks, stop thinking about that. And in this situation, the last thing you want to be is confrontational. You don't want to play good cop, bad cop. You don't want to walk in and act like a simpleton. You want to make sure, know who you're about to interview, what my goal is of this interview. Did I set up the interview room? What are some of the things that I think
Yeah.
that could go wrong and derail me that I can stop now? Increase comms with the other teams that are on the street. And
What
then, Brian,
what do
I
I
have to
know?
know
What
what's my
don't I
strategy
know?
for coming out. Yes. What do I know? What can I prove? Right.
Yeah.
And when what needs,
What
what's
do I
still
need to
missing
know?
from my
Yeah.
evidence chain,
Yeah.
right? And so I would also have a plan. Always, always, officer, have a backup plan for what happens in the room and outside the room. So a person understands now that it's changing to the suspect relationship and they want out. And they will, in fact, go through you to get out that portal. The other thing is, if you think you have enough to make a custodial or the person's no longer free to leave, have some kind of sign, have some kind of statement so it goes seamlessly and flawlessly, and train for that. You don't have to have a real suspect in the room to train interview techniques with your squad or to have them prepared to arrest the person as they come outside, right? It's just like I
Yeah.
read a great thing about show ups the other day, and people are still showing up by bringing the suspect, the likely suspect, the person you're trying to delete as the suspect, to the scene where the crime happened. So they're driving that person in a police car in the back seat to the 7-Eleven, having that person stand out, shining a flashlight, and the guy says, yeah, that's him. Well, that's so one-sided and biased.
Yeah.
Now, let's change that dynamic. You're talking to the person. Okay, you're in plain clothes. The police car has the 7-Eleven guy, and they drive by, and the copper goes, hey, you notice anybody over there in the park that you recognize? And the guy goes, holy crap, the guy in a blue jacket's the guy that robbed me. You see the difference there? So that's what you're going for. You want it to be objectively reasonable the entire
Yeah.
time. And you want it
That's
to be legal. You want it to be, you want to think this out. But you can't do that when you got a high profile crime. You got to
right.
do that in training before you have a high profile crime.
No, that's well, that's a whole nother
That's
episode
a
with
whole
those
episode. Yeah.
examples right
But you get
there.
what I mean. I can't believe that that still happens. I
It,
can't believe that the cops beat that guy to death on, he didn't beat him to death at the scene, but he ultimately died. I see those things and they defy logic. Why? Because, Brian, we've both been at police academies and we've trained at police academies, and the kick to the skull, you get what I'm trying
it's
to
not
say? And
something. Yeah.
come on. So if you choose off the menu, you reap the whirlwind. So as an interview or an interrogation or a sniper
That's
or whatever your role is, you
yeah.
better do your homework.
Yeah. That's it's not. You can't color outside the lines ever.
You
because
can.
then it doesn't
Not in this.
just
Not.
well,
It's
it
like a
doesn't just
surgeon.
destroy
Hey,
that,
I'm going to.
but
Oh,
because
come on.
it doesn't just destroy that case, it's everything you've ever worked
Yep.
on. I mean, that's the issue too. It's not it doesn't
Your
just
body
speak
of
to that
work,
one. Yeah,
your relevance, your
yeah.
trust, your honor, your word. Right?
So
Come on.
yeah, so I and I think we covered everything that they definitely had questions
God,
about
I hope so.
on this. And this is why we don't teach TTPs, but we teach human performance, cognitive performance, human behavior. And that's why, because you can use it in all these. There might be great
Yes.
TTPs out there, but the problem sometimes is one, if the person knows these TTPs, it's not going to work. And two, if
Exactly.
one, if they're well, I would say first, one, if they're talking to you, then you're on a good start. They you know what I'm saying?
Only
There's
you can
others.
ruin it. You've got the
Yes.
keys.
Yeah,
Yeah. You've got
it's
the
like
keys in
it's
your
like
pocket.
precision rifle shooting. You're the problem, not the rifle. Like it is what you're trying to do
Exactly.
is let the rifle do the work and not
Yep.
screw up the shot. Like this thing is designed to
Right.
hit that target. Don't get in its way, right?
And you don't always know. Listen, have you received a list before of high priority targets as a sniper? Coppers, think of what I'm talking about. There's also a list that comes with that of lower priority, but you know what? If you see this person, they're good for a meeting, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. So if you have that going in, then you have more than enough information to do your job, but you may never know why. Somebody's not going to call you and you go, did you understand why that person's B on your list? That's not your job. Your job is to go in and get information. So, Copper, first do no harm. Get in
Yeah,
there and get that
always.
information. And if they're talking, you got to. Now, we could do 2 episodes on how to get them talking, 3 with some practical application. But in
That's
this
a
one, it's much easier.
yeah, that's something that we can talk a little bit more about some of that on the Patreon side for sure, but that's also
Sure.
more of an in-person type thing and
You're exactly
not
right.
meant for
And
a
the
public podcast that anyone can listen to.
precisely.
So
And that's the insider game. Because listen, we're not going to tell you how to be a good crook,
yeah,
but I'll tell you this,
that's the
we
thing.
can teach you how to find a good crook.
If you're listening, you ever wonder why we don't get into more detail on certain things, it's because we're protecting what we're talking
Yeah, you're not
about.
the
And
only one listening.
yeah, you're not, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's not, there's a lot of things that people talk about and do and put on
Yep.
YouTube and on podcasts that they absolutely should not be. And so we try to stay away from doing anything like that because it's not appropriate. And I think a lot of what people are doing is just wrong, and you're giving information. But thankfully,
Yep.
most bad guys out there aren't sitting around studying this stuff. They're learning the hard way as they go through life and have a fairly low level of sophistication, but some of them are pretty
And
organized.
a high
So
rate of recidivism. Yeah,
yeah,
no, you're right on.
so
Yeah, and we're not talking about sophistication and organization because a lot of there's a lot of people that are repeat offenders that have a high degree of
oh
organization,
yeah,
and you're going, why do they get caught? Because we've seen it before.
yeah.
That's what they're not getting. They're getting better at it, but guess what? You
You
set a pattern,
you set a
and that
pattern, yeah.
pattern that you set is
Hmm.
so hard to break. And so, guess what? It sort of defines you, and that rich tapestry that you've defined. If somebody taps into it, they go, "Hey, this is him. This is the composer." That's how they see art fakes, right, Brian?
Yeah,
Somebody matches the brushstroke, but when they get into it, they go, "Hey, the amazing thing is this paint wasn't available during that time period, and there was a great fire at the cathedral, and there's no ash in the paint."
there's
So, as hard as you think you thought of your excuse, there
yeah
are scientific methodologies that are meant to break that down. So you're
there's
not
a
as clever as you think.
there
So
is a
don't
good
play it.
one. There is a good one on Netflix. I can't remember the name. I'll put it in the episode details when I look it up. But
Yep.
it's actually about a guy who he was a sommelier, so he's a wine expert. And what he did was recreated older wines, their labels, everything, had this aging process, and would sell these rare, sometimes 40, 50-year-old wines or older with these rare
Yeah.
vintages. But the reason why he got away with it for so long, could do it, was he actually knew wine really well. So he would take the notes from the flavors of what it's supposed to be, and he would find wines that you
Great.
could buy today and mix them to get something that would be close. I mean, you're not going to get someone who's going to open it and go, yeah, that's the 67 whatever, I remember that. No, it just has to be close enough. So he was so good at that part of it until some wine
Right.
family saw some auction where they went, wait, we didn't make that type that year, we didn't start it till the next year. where did
Right.
this come from? And then it all came crashing down,
Right.
and people were buying. And so it just reminded me of
Yep.
that very simple way of doing it. And he was actually able to recreate that, and it's no different than someone doing it at a lower
If
level on the street. It's just not as
what you just did
organized.
is you
Yeah.
epitomized this hour.
Yeah.
So listen, you're saying why did he call 911? Because I want my narrative first. Why did I voluntarily come to the station? Because I'm not in handcuffs and in the backseat of the patrol car.
I got
Why are you
this.
sitting here treating me nice? Because I'm talking to you. And the longer that goes on, he's bamboozled thinking. But guess what? Why did he flee, Brian? Because he had an exit strategy the whole
Yep.
time.
The whole time.
As it gets more focused, I'm bailing. Did
Yeah.
the coppers? Think of that for a minute. I'm gonna leave that hanging, Chad.
Right.
Did the coppers
Have
have
a
the same
plan
kind of
if he
plan?
was going to run.
Yeah. Did
Right.
you have a plan
Exactly.
B and C and D? Come
Yeah.
on, come on,
All right. Well,
come on.
we
The Peter
covered.
Griffin.
Yeah. We there's Taylor Swift and
Remember?
Taylor
Come
not so
on.
Swift.
Not so
Um,
swift. That's
so
hilarious, by the way.
so we covered a lot in that, and so hopefully we answered
Yeah,
all the questions side. But I think there might be some more we can discuss on the Patreon side specifically on this, but we'll see
sure.
about that. We'll talk about that when we're in person here next week. But thanks everyone for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Please keep reaching out with some of the questions or suggestions for podcast topics. We love to hear it. Please share the episode with your friends, and stay tuned for more. We've got a lot coming up this year,
Yep.
which will be exciting. So
Big
stay
year.
tuned. And if you're on the Patreon side, you will have sort of insider access to some of that stuff. And you'll want to get on that. So we suggest you check out the Patreon site. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and don't forget that training changes behavior.